Listen, I'm sick to death of all of these lead swingers, as I like to call them, who seem to think it's a great idea not to have to go anywhere but the lounge or the living room or the dining room with their little Apple laptop, and they don't have to ever go into work ever again. It's bad for the economy, it's bad for people's mental health, and it's bad for the socialisation of young people, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think this is one thing that we've forgotten during the coronavirus pandemic, the importance of human interaction.
Yeah.
I always get the impression that a lot of these scientists just don't value human interaction in the way perhaps we do.
Well, of course they don't, because they're all geeks. They're all the kids that from school that didn't have any mates, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I will say one thing, though. I do think it's ludicrous that we're all crammed in cities and towns, and then we all run off to the office and, all get on the train at exactly the same time. I do think there should be more home offices, and I do think that there should be more staggered start times, perhaps sort of have core hours for a lot of people. I mean, I've got to be honest with you. All I do is have a rucksack with my laptop and then just find a socket wherever I am, and that's kind of good enough for me. But, as you say, productivity is driven up by human interaction. And let's be honest, right? How many of us are actually working from bed rather than working from home?
Right. The other thing, though, Andre, is you've got the happy situation that you are able to do what you do simply by talking into a microphone. Similar to me, it's not really like working at all. But if you actually have a proper job, and most people do, which involves interaction with other people, possibly doing things that other people are telling you to do, functionality, answering phones, printing things on a photocopier, all of the stuff that is relatively mundane but has to be done. I mean, you and I are thankfully, spared all that sort of nonsense. But basically, most people need to go into an office, need to do a job of work, or at least get into a van and drive it, or get into a supermarket and stand there and help people with their shopping. Most people cannot do what you and I do. And therefore, the idea that you're kind of pushing them into this situation where they don't ever meet anyone, they don't ever do anything. I'm sick to death of getting people on the phone who are supposedly in help desks all over the place going, please forgive me, I'm working from home at the moment. And you hear some kid crying in the background or a dog barking or something. And you're going, I just want this sorted. I don't care. Get into work.
Well, also, the other thing that's worth pointing out, I mean, there's a big difference between being somebody self-employed like we are, owning your own business and working for somebody. Because, if I was running a company with, 20, 30, 40 members of staff, and they were all kind of disparate, they were at home, hard to track down. I heard a brilliant example, by the way, of, I won't say which local authority, but there was a guy during the pandemic who was the curb inspector, which shouldn't be a job anyway, but he'd moved to Australia during the pandemic and just put his phone on divert. Really? And they only discovered this because they sent him out to inspect a curb and he was unable to do it on the grounds he was living in Hogarth.
Yes, but, unbelievable.
It is crazy, and I think the big problem is there's no way of guaranteeing that the employees at your company are going to do the right thing. And this is the thing that we've completely forgotten. I'm sick of these pious people talking about baking banana bread. This country may well spend more on the pandemic than the defeat of Nazi Germany. We may take 150 years to pay back this overdraft. And, of course, productivity's gone through the floor. We are risking turning this country into a third world country. Yeah. And people are sleepwalking into it.
Yeah, but also, do you really want a situation, Andre, where London becomes a kind of home of the single dwelling bicyclist, the people who can put their belongings into a rucksack and just carry it around on their back, cycle into work, take the old lycra off, put a suit on, sit there and do a civil service job, and then go home. Because it's becoming more and more difficult for anybody to do a proper day's work in London because it's so expensive. They're now talking about, Sadiq Khan's now talking about charging people by the mile for driving. The trains are overcrowded because the people who actually can't do the cycling and can't and actually have to turn up for a proper job of work are crammed into trains that are not long enough or don't come often enough for them to be able to do it properly. I mean, London is becoming a middle class kind of and working class only area, so that people are either making loads of money or they're making no money.
Yeah, I think it's incredibly frustrating and the way that our city centres are going. And of course, what people forget is, people going into offices are going to buy sandwiches and cups of coffee and all of the paraphernalia that goes with it at local shops. I mean, if you look at what we've done to the pubs, what we've done to the restaurants, what we've done to the cafes, it's been absolutely catastrophic. And pubs are supposed to be a part of British national culture. We have absolutely destroyed them. And I find it just incredibly frustrating. But I have to say, and this may not go down well with everybody, but I was incredibly frustrated when I was a little bit ill with Omicron. Now, I'm not belittling people who were seriously ill with it, but I personally was a little bit ill, tested positive on my test, and then had to cancel a whole load of work and sit at home. And really, I was nothing more than slightly under the weather.
Right.
But of course, all of that has a cost, not just to me, but to the economy in general.
Right.
And it's a real problem.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, are we supposed to now look forward to a completely different way of life? Because that's what some people want. We're hearing more and more about the 4-day week. Some people saying, well, I'd like to work 4 days for the same money. Well, of course you would. Why wouldn't you? But that doesn't mean it's a good idea. I mean, I'm sure lots of people would like to work for the same money for 2 days a week. But,
Yes.
I walk around the city and I see more and more buildings closing down, shop fronts not being replaced, not opening again. I was in Canary Wharf not long ago, and half the shops in Canary Wharf aren't even open anymore.
Well, I mean, I've heard Chris Whitty and Boris Johnson and all of these people talk about the V. And what they seem to think is you can shut down the economy and then immediately reopen it and it will go back to normal. That is, I'm afraid, not the case. The problem is, as you know, there's things like momentum. So what you will do is you will have what we call a pipeline, things that you intend to do in 6 months or whatever. And when you're unable to do that, then suddenly it just knocks you out of kilter. Now you multiply that by, 60 million people, and it becomes a real problem. I was talking to a taxi driver the other day, and he said he is still nowhere near back to normal levels. And now, his furlough, self-employed furlough, disappeared absolutely months ago. So these people have got real problems. And I think it's all the same effect, this idea that we don't actually have to bother running our economy. We don't have to bother working. We don't have to bother generating national wealth to be wealthy because there's some credit card that's going to pay for all of it. It's madness.
It really is. Andre, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Andre Walker, political commentator.